Most business conversations only happen in two modes: putting out fires or talking up a wind. Most nobody talks about, out loud at least, about the space in between when things have actually settled. There's no fires to put out, nothing to fight. The real question becomes, what's next? That's the conversation Rich and I have been having privately in our monthly check ins. And today we're putting it on record. I thought it was an interesting conversation. It was something that fascinated me. And it told me about the back end of what things look like when someone's doing something consciously and subconsciously. And he's one of the most honest and forthright people that I know. So I couldn't think of a better person to be able to have the conversation with. So I'm going to give you this as a promise. As listeners, you'll get the language for a conversation almost nobody has, honestly. What to do once crisis is over and things have generally settled down. We'll use the five families, a way of mapping things differently, and to keep you sharp. It's not a quiz, it's shared vocabulary around the conversation. What I did is I looked at the way that I do things. I look at the way that I believe Rich does some things. And then I said, well, if I know these are two, what are some other ways that people do things? And I ended up landing on 10 and then narrowing it down to five families. So we're going to kind of walk through those and just have a regular conversation, because I'm always smarter from every conversation I have every time I catch up with Rich. So with that, dude, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on. You did one with AI before, but this was one that I was like, you know what? I don't really hear a lot of people have. And if they do, it's behind closed doors. It's not really something where everybody else gets to hear it. So thank you. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay. So we talked about on our calls, now that things at Secret Stache have kind of genuinely settled down a bit, what does that space actually feel like day to day?
Yeah, well, I mean, it might take a bit of a background story to sort of set that scene
Please.
up. But so we reached our peak in 23, and then the market sort of, contracted on us a bit. And so we had a lot of fixing to do. We had to downsize the team. We had to downsize expenses. And so we did that in 24 and 25. And this year will be the first year that feels like we're in recovery. We'll grow a bit from 25 if, everything pans out as it seems to be panning out. So at this point, I'm coming out of that phase where I needed to just relax a little bit, right? Because we went 2 years really hard on trying to fix a problem. The problem was obvious, and so we knew what we needed to do, but it still took a really long time for us to get there. So I think it's like 6 months probably or the last 3 months for sure, where things have turned around. The savings account is starting to build back up and get to the point where we're comfortable. And, it's tough because you don't want to go from one, like high speed chase to the next. So, the last 3 months I have sort of been chilling out a little bit more than I think I have in a long time, but you start to get comfortable with that. And I think that that's what this is really about is, okay, now what's next? And, the answer is kind of like, I don't really know, right? Like we're here to figure that out in a lot of ways. Right. But
Yeah.
for me personally, I don't really have a lot of disconnect between my personal life and business. So like what I do in my personal life affects my business life and vice versa, et cetera. So what I found myself doing, again, a little bit subconsciously, although I think it has a lot to do with giving myself some discomfort, is to challenge myself, so got back into the gym, got really serious about that, have over the last couple of months gotten really serious about health and nutrition. It's just building myself back up, right? Taking that time to relax, but at the same time, like, cleaning myself out, like getting back to the point where I feel like, okay, I'm ready to take on another challenge. And I think that, the thing that I've done is I got on calls with every colleague, everyone I know professionally, and just had conversations about, what do you think is next? We all exist in this market that's rapidly changing because of these automation tools and AI. And so it's really good to just reach out and start asking questions with the people who you trust the most. And sometimes you get some gems and you can roll from there.
Yeah. One thing I always try to stress to people that there isn't the divide that people like to think that there is between personal and professional. Because if you've got things going on in your personal life, it's going to creep its way into the professional side, and the professional is going to creep its way into the personal. Because if you're working really hard and then someone's like I've got friends with it, they'll love to say like, oh, well, we should go out. And I'm like, you know what? You have an employee's mindset. When you're done at 9 to 5, like your time is your time. I don't really have it like that. So as a business owner, as a founder, I realize I have to look at things a little bit differently. Like my job stops when I get the job done. I don't really get to punch a clock on it the same way. And there's times they'll want to go out, there's times that they'll want to do things. And I realize I have to maintain the professional side so that I can enjoy the personal side. Because if I don't, then I'll go out and their minds are on completely different things and my mind is still on work.
Yeah, I mean, you need to find the time. It's probably worth noting that, like, I don't have a family, so I do have a lot of extra time and I have to be cognizant of that. But you do fill time and it's your choice what you fill it with. And so if the gym isn't important to you, it gets lower down the list. For me personally, when I'm at my best mentally, I'm also at my best physically. So I recognize it as being a priority. And so, you know, I make it happen. I don't know if I would make it happen if I had young kids, right? I can't say for sure, but I am, at least at this part of my life, making it a priority. And it feels good, right? Like I used to live in a building with a gym and I would try to convince myself all 6 floors as I went down to not go because I don't enjoy it. You know what I mean? But as soon as you get in through that first exercise, you just kind of like paying your way through it. But
Yeah.
when I'm heading back up the elevator, I actually am like, that's why you do it. Because there's a certain feeling that you get that you didn't have prior and it makes you feel good. So there's a lot of things like that. Like it doesn't have to be weightlifting. It could be running, it could be walking, getting sun. There's all these things that exist that are really good for your mental health. So I think you have to figure out what that is. It's easy for me to say, it's easy for me to accomplish these things, but I think everybody has to figure out, how do I ensure that I'm, taking care of myself?
Yeah. Yeah. One, I know exactly what you're talking about with the gym, and you just made me miss it because I haven't been working out. I've just been work, 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 work because I wanted to get as many things in place as possible. But I know the feeling where it's like, you know what, I should get up and I should work. Thankfully, I've got the Apple Watch where it'll remind me, you've been sitting a little too long. Get up, and then I'll get up and I'm like, all right, well, I got to go do something. So I get to get a little something in, but I haven't worked out the way that I would normally work out. But I remember the talking myself into going to the gym, and the moment I left the locker room and I got to that first exercise, it was like, all right, you're here now. Like you might as well give it what you got. And then on the way out, I felt so much better, and it clears out the brain fog and everything else that comes along with it. So whatever your version of that might be, it's good to be able to have that thing to break it up, because if it's just constantly in one mode, then there's just so many other things that you'll miss. And like before we hit record, I was talking about blind spots. That's what creates those kind of blind spots.
Yeah.
Like if you're only in one mode, there's all these other things that are going on around you that you could easily miss if you're not taking time to be able to kind of check the forest for the trees. So yeah. Okay. So things have kind of calmed down past 3 to 6 months. Has that felt like it was earned, or did it feel like something that you kind of just, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop now?
Well, we definitely earned it. It was hard. It was hard trying to figure out, how do we correct the ship so that we can survive. And I still think that it's like only short-term guarantee survival, right? Because everything's moving so quickly, and, the work that we do, which is primarily development work, and on the lower end of that's like, basic apps and websites and things like that. There are just so many threats coming from every area. But like in the meantime, right? Like as you have to give yourself some rest. I mean, the older you get, the more you have to rest, right? So I'm 46, just turned 46. And so for me, it was almost a requirement. I could feel myself being burnt out. And I think over time, when you go through these like cycles where you are approaching burnout, you get better at recognizing how things are unraveling on you, right? Like you can feel it unraveling. And I'm the type of person who I'm either, I guess the anecdote is, my apartment is either spotless or it's a disaster, and there's no in between. And it really is a representation of where I am mentally, right? So it's like,
Mhm.
I have to catch myself because it can very, very quickly unravel into a nightmare, right? And so I think a lot of people have their own version of that, and to what degree it's actually a problem varies, I'm sure, from person to person. But for me, it's bad. It's like it's bipolar. I'm not bipolar, but like it is very extreme, where it's either, everything is exactly where it should be, or I can't find anything, right?
The
And
extreme
so,
opposites. Yeah.
and that's sort of where I'm at now, right? It's where it's like I've been comfortable, so being on a really, really regimented schedule and ensuring that certain things are perfectly aligned, because I have to be like very, very focused. I don't have to be very, very focused right now. And so slowly but surely, you see the unravel. And that's the thing that I am most interested in right now, is like, I've gotten to a point in my life where I can recognize it before it's too late. And then you start to, either if you have mastermind groups, you're having the conversations there. If you have a therapist, you're having the conversations there. You start to, set the schedule back up. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. And for me, a lot of that's experimental, changing the time that you go to the gym, putting in the calendar when you eat, like if you're like me and you work crazy hours, you don't eat the right way. And so just reminding yourself to get these things scheduled and making sure that you're actually, when the alarm goes off, you're doing it. Cause, there's also that world in which the alarm goes off, you did that great, but you just turned it off and you ignored it. Right. So just trying to be as aware of these things as you can be and making sure that you're following through with what the promises you made to yourself. Right. But, for me, like I've been traveling a lot. I've been splitting my time between Denver and Mexico. I think that's part of the problem is that, it's hard to really like focus if you're putting yourself into different, scenarios too often.
Environments, yeah.
So I think that's something that I have to consider is do I do that or do I just stay put for the year so that I can really, really focus on this? And I'm probably going to do that, right? I could still vacation down in Mexico, but not spend 6 months there. And so I'm moving out of a small studio and I'm moving downtown to a bigger place with its own office. And that's sort of this uncomfortable step where I'll be paying quite a bit more. And, if I'm paying a little bit more, then I need to earn more or I can't save as much, so these are all like personal decisions that will help motivate me on the business. And we joked about before the call, like, if you're in a relationship, your budget might go up, or if you have children, your budget might go up. There's all these things that are personal that affect how much money you need. And if you're diligent about that, then you can sort of back into what you need. And if you put yourself into an uncomfortable position where now you need to earn more, you're going to be more likely, hopefully, to try to find where you can make those ends meet from the business. So right now, all I've really been doing is putting my personal life, into these experiments or these less comfortable scenarios, right? Making it, something that isn't familiar. And when you feel like uncomfortable and familiar, that's when you hear a lot of people say that that's when you're in like the right space, like your cortisol is right and your attention span will focus more because it's more requirement than it is a luxury, So that's where I am now. It's like all these experiments personally. And then, I have a date in mind. It's when I move into the new place that, okay, now you have a completely different, space that you're in. What a great time to, put together the next plan.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. I was watching something and the woman was saying, when you feel like you've been in the same mode for a little too long, change the template. Like you have to switch things up and it will allow you to be able to lock in again. And that's one of the things I've been repeating to myself for the past few days. Like I saw it a few days ago, and throughout the day, I'll just in the back of my head, I hear a voice say, change the template. So I have the specific routines. These are some of the little subconscious and conscious things that people will do to kind of keep things interesting. Like I can very much spend the better part of my day in front of the computer, just working on a bunch of things, and I have to remember that I have to be able to step away from it so that I can see to all the other aspects of life. Because like a lot of my conversations are with AI these days and building out content and talking about different things. And the break I get sometimes is doing podcasts and having meetings and networking and stuff like that. So just to kick back and just relaxing. Yeah, no, I haven't done that in a little while. So changing the template, like I've got a terrace I haven't used in like a year. Like I had to nudge the door just to be able to open it because I hadn't opened it in a while. And like, it's one of those things where normally I'll move furniture out there so I can go kind of lamp for a little while. And I realized I hadn't done that in easily that full year. So it's just little reminders of things that will like, if you change the template, you can change the routine, you change the routine, you change the results. And it's the things that people end up doing. So that's actually a really good segue because I mentioned that there's different ways that people will kind of work through that comfort zone because now more than ever, because of AI, because of how fast things are moving, it's very hard to get comfortable. There's survival mode and putting out fires and crises and all the rest of that. Once you're in it, it's sometimes hard to get back out of it. So when things get good, sometimes people may create problems just because they're so used to being in that mode that they're looking for something, that next shoe to drop. So I want to cover the 5 different families real quick. So stake-based is really just external pressures, engineering on purpose. Common mechanisms raise the cost of coasting until coasting stops being an option. Appetite-based, that internal hunger that doesn't need the external pressure. The common mechanism is the gap itself is the fuel. relational, the accountability to someone outside of ourselves. The next one is comparative. It needs a reference, a point that moves. So common mistakes or common mechanisms is measuring yourself against something in motion, a peer group, a past version of yourself, so that it's nothing ever really feels like it's stagnant or static. It's always, well, I got to be better than who I was yesterday, or however you choose to measure yourself. And the other one is pattern based, motivated by watching, not doing. Common mechanism: comfort feels dangerous because it means they stopped observing, not because they stopped producing. And it's just another way of saying, you know what, I'm looking at the patterns, I'm seeing things coming up, but am I doing something about it? Like, am I ahead of the pattern? Am I ahead of the curve? AI is another way of looking at it. Every time it comes out with a new iteration, every time it comes out with something, like, are you still doing what you were doing on the old one? Or now that they have the new one, do you feel like now you have to come up with something else? So those are the 5 families. What I would want to be able to ask you about is, have you ever manufactured a stake on purpose? I know sometimes people do things on purpose and sometimes it's subconscious, but have you ever manufactured anything on purpose, like raise your own cost of coasting so that you never really had to worry about feeling too comfortable? Or is it something where you have your own way of doing things?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always experimenting.
Hmm.
That's something that I've done for as long as I can remember, especially, for sure within my adult, life. I don't know if it's something that I did all the way back when I was a kid, but I never like to have, like, I like to have like a pattern and a schedule, right? But I don't like that schedule to be the schedule for too long, right? And usually it's just, every year it's something a little bit different. So I've been to the gym at all the different times of the day to sort of see what worked the best for me. I used to work late. Now I'm up really early, right? A lot of that is circumstance. Our development team is in Ukraine. The earlier I'm up, the more I can spend time with them. So you adapt your life maybe around one major thing, but by getting up really early, that means in working with them, I can't go to the gym right away. So now it's, you sort of like fit everything in like a jigsaw, but everything I do is either deliberate or it's by mistake, but I recognize it as a benefit in some way and it becomes deliberate. Right. So everything from when I decided to move to Mexico, I moved to Mexico when everything was sort of on fire, because it was like, I need to be I want to get completely away from anything that makes sense, right? I need a fresh office space. I need a fresh, you know, community, all of that, because it will help me sort of have a fresh take on this problem. Because you work in your business day in and day out, like you start to fall into your own patterns, whether or not they're good. And I'm always challenging myself, always. I had mentioned it offline that, in July, it was the first time that I know for sure that I prepared every meal that I had for the entire month. I didn't realize that I was doing that until about halfway through July, but I went through my credit card. I read, oh, it's true. I actually have not spent money on anything but groceries, right? And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to see if I can do it for the whole month. Like, why not? It's these little tiny challenges that I'm always doing, whether it's personal or business related. For business, it was when I was really unsure what we should do to move forward. Once we started to stabilize, we have to find new markets. We have to find new products and services, challenged to reach out and have a call every day with a colleague and just try to get, indirect advice, right? So it's, what are you up to? What's working for you? What problems are you like? And then boom, you start to get, those aha moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with AI, it's more about, what do I want to do? Not can I do it? I'm at the
Yeah.
point now where I'm pretty confident that anything that I would want to build, I'm capable of building with AI assistance at this point, right? And so looking at all the things that we either pay for or are running through spreadsheets that could be software, I'm just running down the list and I'm just knocking them all out. As I'm doing that, right, I'm starting to learn, wow, I'm actually capable of producing high quality output. So now all of a sudden, what was really just an exercise of, I need to learn this stuff. It's inevitable. We could probably benefit from it. Now I'm thinking, wow, I think I might have the confidence, or I am approaching the confidence to start selling this to others. So now there's another opportunity, and that will create another challenge. Okay, well, who's going to pay? Who's going to be the first sucker to pay, right? Like, 'cause it's like somebody has to be the first, and
Yeah.
I think objectively they are the sucker, right? Because like they're paying you money for something that you have no, experience with,
Yeah. It's funny. Before we got on this podcast. I was having a conversation with a guy I've known for, over a decade now. And I met him when he was going into sales, and then he ventured out into having his own business. He's got ideas and things that he wants to be able to do. And he was like, we should partner together. And I kind of chuckled to myself because I was like, what you're missing is the stability. And what I'm missing is the reason to be out there doing some of the things. So like, he's very much sales, like he's on the phone. He's like, oh, I got these connections. And the more he started talking through with how we could collaborate, the thing is, so all we would have to do is this and grab these people and this people and do this and do that. And I was like, no, see, that's your part. I've intentionally removed myself from being at events. I'm past the point of really wanting to do a lot of that. My interest in that is not what it used to be. I've done it so much and did it, dare I say, well enough where it's like I can't improve upon that. So that's not really my world anymore. What is my world is very much what you said, like systems, frameworks, all the rest of that. I love that. I can do that all day.
There's this interesting, I don't know what the right word is. It's certainly not a diagnosis or anything like that or a psychosis, but there is this interesting thing that's happening that I'm seeing people talk about, where, in the past, engineers sit in front of the computers all day, one way or the other, right? That's always been the case, but there would be points in the day where they would hit a roadblock and they couldn't get past it. And so as a result of that, they would get up, they would take a walk, they'd go have lunch, they'd end their day. But now there is no roadblock because every time you run into an error, you just copy the error into the model and the model figures it out for you. And so there's this thing that's happening where people are coming to. So they started the day with the lights off because it was bright out, and then they come, it's dark, and they don't remember the transition.
Yes.
How long have I been here? Type mentality, because what happens to your mental state when all roadblocks are removed from a digital environment, right? So, you're sitting in front of a computer and you really relied on those roadblocks for your sanity, for your appetite, for your mental health. Now what? So those are the things that are kind of interesting now, is like the psychological and the sociological impacts of not being faced with roadblocks. That's interesting. And there's a lot of aha coming out of that. Like, okay, well, we have to be the people who are.
Now we have to be our own checks and balance. Yeah.
Or you have to have like a buddy system for it or something like that. And usually when you work in co-working spaces, that's all you really need. It's an isolation where these things occur. But the thing is that developers, engineers, they tend to prefer to work in isolation. So, if you're working in a co-working space, people are going to interrupt you all day anyway. But if you're working in like a home office, you're going to be introduced to some interesting dynamics over the next couple of years.
Yeah, you're telling my story. I mean, it is really one of those things where once I learned that I could work from home and how productive I was, it was a wrap. And the boundaries are gone. Like I can literally sit down in the morning and I will forget to eat. I will look up and it'll be, well into the evening. And it's like, dude, you had like an English muffin in the morning and you didn't think about anything since. And you just look up because you don't have those roadblocks. You don't have the thing that says, all right, well, I hit a wall. And now that I hit this wall, it's a good time for me to step away. I don't hit those walls the same way anymore. And it gets even worse because you learn how to ask better questions with AI. So even if you run into a wall, there's times where it will teach you how to be able to ask the question better. I learned that from you because I remember you saying like sometimes you went through something and you're building something out and you said, okay, we finally got to that answer. Now that I know what that answer is, how do we get there faster next time so I don't run through this whole thing? So the expectations have gone up. It's not about something failing. Like with the tools that I was looking at, some of these things have gone under. They went under because they built something around something and the shelf life for it evaporated because that thing ended up getting not necessarily obsolete. It just wasn't going to be as profitable.
Well, yeah, and the models themselves figure it out, and then you don't need that tool.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing everyone has to keep in mind is that like you are literally feeding your IP to the usurper.
Yes.
So be cognizant of the fact that everything you give it, it's learning how to do it
Yes.
so that it doesn't need as much from you as it did prior, right? So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, that is part of the scary thing, because I know I've had conversations and it'll say, "Yeah, I remember you said that," and I'm like, "I thought you didn't remember these things,"
yeah,
and it'll pick up on certain stuff and it starts to fill in the space. Fascinating. Yeah, I love it for that reason, because again, comfort zone, it's just a challenge to me. It's like, okay, so if you got that smart now, I got to figure out how to be smarter.
yeah,
So I'm constantly pressing myself to be able to look and go, okay, what are some of the other things that I can tap into that allow me? So when you raise the floor, I can go up to another form of rarefied air so that you can't touch what it is I'm doing. So for me, the comfort zone again is that aha. Like I don't need to worry about the stakes because the stakes are going to be what they are. But what I'm looking for is that moment when I feel like something's caught up to it a certain extent, and I'm looking for that aha moment. And it's just I constantly need to feed that, because that is what allows me to be able to keep going. And that's why I could very easily sit at the computer for hours and hours and hours and not feel like I'm missing out on anything. So I will bring it back around, because I know we went into AI, but this is part of that comfort zone, because you can get to a point where you can be successful. You can get to the point where it's not about failure anymore. It's about how good your tool can be. Pause.
yeah,
And it's how to be able to build something so that it's efficient, because now it's not about, is it going to fail? It's about how many different aspects of it did you think about before you rolled it out? Because there are so many different things that can come out. Like AI is going to be able to look at what you're doing and come up with another version of it. Somebody else is going to be able to look at it and come up with another version of it. So when you're building something, if you're building it for shelf life, I would almost say if you're building something, your business model has to be, how many iterations of this idea can I have that's going to stay ahead of somebody else figuring out what I did the first time? And if you can think about it like that, that's where you can start to get a little more comfortable in what you're doing. But if you don't have that, then pick one of the 5 families and you're going to be on that list trying to figure out how to be able to stay ahead, because you can be successful, but you still have to worry about what AI is doing and what everybody else is watching. Because the saying says, once you say an idea out loud, it stops belonging to you and it belongs to the rest of the world. And then the rest of the world is trying to figure out how to be able to create their version of it. So I wanted to have this conversation because I think there's a lot of people that focus on putting out fires and doing all the rest of that. And then there's the people talking about what they accomplished. There are a lot of people in that middle ground that have to figure out, okay, well, I've made some money, I've done well, but how do I make sure that I stay ahead of the curve? And you're someone that is doing that. You're someone that does it well. And I wanted other people to see what that conversation kind of looks like and where there are opportunities for you to be able to do that. And I is one, it's definitely one of the biggest ones. It's understanding how to be able to ask the right questions. It's understanding whatever you give it, if you give it something good, it can give you something great back. And it's just trying to figure out how to be able to do that. And it's also knowing if you create a great product, a great service, a great idea, understand that it's something catching up to you and you can only get but so comfortable. So there's healthy ways to be able to address the comfort zone. And then there's the ones that aren't healthy. I wanted to start having a conversation about both so that if you have something that isn't healthy, I'm a workaholic. I can sit in front of the computer all day. One of the drawbacks is I got to work out. Like if I don't do that, then I will be somebody that when I start getting older, I'm not going to be able to move around because I spend all day at the desk. So you have to figure out what the compromise is going to be for yourself. You, Rich, are one of the people that, in my mind, you may not agree with it, but you're one of the people that I believe figured it out. And you have such a great balance that I always like to present people that are great examples of something. And you're one of the best examples that I can think of someone that has the balance of, you don't have to stay ready because you don't have to get ready because you stay ready, but at the same time, you balance it out so that you have a life and you get to enjoy the life that you live. And I wanted people to be able to see an example of that.
you know, there's probably two things that have become like a really important part of my life in the way that I look at it, or how I envision all this as an entrepreneur. One is normalize how much you need and only take what you need. One of the greatest things that we had when everything kind of went to shit was we had savings because I didn't take that money.
Mm,
So I gave us the breathing room that we needed to figure out the problem, because if you keep moving, you'll figure out the problem. And that segues in to the second piece, which is the only consistent thing that I've seen across all the people who I consider to be successful is that they didn't stop. So it's like
yeah.
It's like sometimes you think that you're just going through the motions, but sometimes it's all you have. You don't have a great new idea. You don't have an opportunity that's going to get you out of this. So you got to do something. And so you do something. And that something might be, in retrospect, you know, when it comes to like earning money or whatever, a waste of time, but you kept moving, you didn't give up. And I think that if you can manage those two things, meaning you might have a banger year, you might have several banger years. If you start to elevate your income as a result of the near term, you're going to be unprepared for when things go wrong. And that's just the inevitable truth of being an entrepreneur, is that you are going to have down years. How do you survive those? Well, you survive them by living modestly for as long as you can. Again, what modest means changes depending on who your dependents are or your dependencies are, right? So like figuring that out and then giving yourself a long enough runway to survive, you'll eventually figure it out, right? And then the other thing is like make sure that you just don't give up, because you don't know when. People in Hollywood talk about it all the time. And I'm going to screw up who it is, so I'm not going to say anyone's name, but I remember not too long ago someone saying that like they got their break in their 50s, but they had been
Yes.
acting or trying to act since their 20s. Wow. We all know who this person is, right? So it's very, very well-known actor. I just can't remember who it was. Wow, 30 years, right? And now they get to live the life they always wanted. And, if you're in your 50s, you still have a good amount of life left, right? So it's like you can do that, but most people, they just can't, right? There's too many responsibilities that pull them away. And like that's okay. Get a job, whatever. But if you're going to live this life, you have to be willing to put in, years, decades before things pop for you. So just get prepared to live modestly. And if you're lucky and you make a lot of money and you can upscale, then fine. But it's like, everyone could probably live a little lower than what they're spending, right? We know that's true because everyone's in debt, right? So like statistically everyone's in debt, so like everyone's living too far ahead, but I don't think people care about that as much as we think people care about.
It's more of a marketing tool of I generated this much. And my follow-up question is, and how much of that did you get to keep? So I don't look at those things that way. I love that you talked about the runway, because that's one of the biggest things. And don't quit. I'm not even going to try to add to it. I'm only going to say those are the things that stood out to me, because if you have the runway, you're buying yourself enough time to be able to figure it out. And if you don't quit, that runway is going to be enough space for you to be able to figure out what you're doing, as long as you start with a good enough idea and you pay attention to what's going on around you. Like, I'm big on situational awareness. If you understand what's going on around you, you can figure out how to be able to create a stopgap, something that'll bridge the gap between where you're at and where you're trying to go, long enough for you to figure out what the next thing's going to be and the next thing's going to be. And that's the entrepreneurial life.
Even if your idea isn't good, right? Most ideas are terrible. Most businesses fail. That doesn't really matter. I mean, like eventually something will happen. You'll have been introduced to somebody who takes you to that next level, right? There's all these different ways that the only way that you could have ever achieved it was because you tried a bad idea, right? So like good ideas are like a good idea is what? An idea that actually earns money. I mean, like, a lot of bad ideas are actually incredibly creative. They just don't make sense with regard to making money,
Yeah.
but like,
Yeah.
they're not necessarily bad,
No. I mean, you can be very profitable off of failures. That's what business coaches do to a certain extent. They've figured out how all these different ways to fail, and they can tell you, don't do that. And they get paid well to be able to say, don't do that. And here's all the reasons why. And the good ones can wrap a story around it in a way that makes someone actually believe them. And then the other ones, they're out there and they wait on hindsight to go, I told you so. So next time something comes up, come to me and I can help guide you through it. Like, what's the saying? Those that can't do, teach. So it's one of those things where those failures aren't necessarily failures if you figure out how to repurpose them.
Yeah.
So there's always a way to kind of leverage what it is that you know. And I have learned more from failures than I have from my success. Always.
Yeah. Like you get all the benefit from succeeding, but you don't learn anything, right? Like,
you learn who loves you when you're up.
Yeah, that's true. You do. Yeah.
Like that part will, like, so when things are great, like, look at who comes around. But like from the failures, from the things that didn't work out the way that you thought they would, those are the real learning moments. And you can actually take those, repurpose those, and have a whole career based on that. Because that's what a lot of entrepreneurs ship is about. That's what coaching is about. That's where expertise kicks in. It's showing people the things that they don't want to do so that they can get to the thing that they do want to do that's actually going to help them succeed. So take from that what you will. I love this conversation. I want to be mindful of your time because I've kept you well over what I initially set it out for, but this is why I love having these conversations, because very much like talking to AI or someone that's an expert in their field, I can very easily lose track of time. So I'm going to pump the brakes here and say, we talked about the comfort zone. We talked about ways to address it. AI is one of the main ways that you can look at it. I've listed out the 5 families of different ways that people have comfort zones and how they try to address it. I'm going to put an article together that will break it down more, and there'll be content around it, but I wanted this to be the introduction and to share an actual example of someone that figured out how to be able to balance things out, and then make it more of a conversation that you can put a name to, because once you know what it is and you can put a name to it, then it's up to you whether you would do something about it. So I will leave it there. I want to say thank you so much, Rich. It's always, always, always a pleasure. So I appreciate you. Like, share, and subscribe. I will see you guys next time. And strategic thinkers, thank you.
Thanks.